Hi, I'm Femi Oke, and you're in the stream. Today, 71 years after the United States dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, Japan, Barack Obama is set to become the first sitting US president to visit the city. So what does it mean for US-Japan relations? This is a topic that is going around the entire world. Everybody is interested in what is happening in Hiroshima, and the first US president to visit since the bombing back in 1945. Malika Blau, our digital producer, what are you seeing online?
Well, it explains why we're hearing from Japanese and from people who have been to Japan.
Sure.
And a lot of that conversation is about to apologize or not to apologize on behalf of the US. So take a look at this tweet from Sleepless in VA. He says, "I don't think an apology will change history or historical evidence. It's more important to learn from the past." And he includes these pictures that he took at the Nagasaki Atomic Museum. And this image right there, he explains in this next tweet, it's a figure that marks the location spot of the detonation of the bomb. Surreal to be standing there. So wherever you are in the world, we want you to weigh in on this live conversation. Tweet us with hashtag AJStream.
My name is Elliot Ackerman. I'm a former military officer and author of the novel Green on Blue, and I'm in the stream.
US President Barack Obama is in Japan this week, and it's his trip to the city of Hiroshima that's attracting the most attention. Hiroshima is the site of the world's first atomic bombing carried out by the United States in the final days of World War II. The 1945 attack killed 140,000 people and has negatively impacted the lives of many more in the decades since. Though Obama's visit to Hiroshima is historic, he has made it clear that he will not apologize for the bombing, and that's fine with many, including the Japanese government and even some survivors who say an apology isn't necessary. So, how significant is President Obama's visit? To help us talk about this, we're joined by Setsuko Thurlow, a survivor of the Hiroshima bombing who now lives in Toronto, Canada. She was 13 at the time of the bombing, which killed her sister and her 4-year-old nephew. Setsuko has spent her adult life advocating for a nuclear-free world. Dr. Akiko Mikamo is a psychologist and peace activist. Her father, Shinji, is also a survivor of the bombing. She joins us from Hiroshima. Yujiro Taniyama is a filmmaker and the founder of the website japanbroadcasting.net. And right here on the set, we're joined by Daniel Bob from the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, and that's an organization that focuses on the US-Japan relationship. So I'm going to start here with a picture of your dad, Dr. Mikamo. This was him as a young man. What did he tell you as you were growing up about what happened to him in 1945? Did he talk about it much?
He talked about the bits and pieces of the experiences, how he was on top of the roof at 3/4 of a mile from the epicenter, and he had 100% exposure. So it was a horrendous, like purely hellish experience. But more, he talked about how important it is to be resilient and not give up and not hold grudge and just move forward. And he wanted me to become a bridge across different cultures, so nobody would ever have to suffer from this.
I'm just wondering, would he want an apology? Does he want an apology?
He doesn't need an apology. He's very, very clear about it. That apology, that it's not that apology that's needed, it's the acknowledgement of what has happened and really the attitude to learn what has happened instead of putting the blindfold on people, and commitment for the future. That's more important.
We heard one story there. Setsuko, I'm wondering if you would want an apology, and that's a question people online are asking. I want to read you this tweet we got from someone named Neslihan. She says, "The pain and suffering caused to the people of Nagasaki and Hiroshima during World War II are the ones that it matters about whether or not they get an apology. Do they want it?" What's your answer to that question?
Well, I can't speak for other people, but I can say how I feel. If the president offers apology, I think it's appropriate. But if he chooses not to offer it, I would understand considering the political climate of the United States.
Yujiro, what do you make of President Obama's visit to Hiroshima? He's in Japan anyway. He didn't have to go to Hiroshima. What do you make of it? What's the motive, do you think, from your perspective?
Well, Femi, first of all, thank you for having me in the show and giving me a voice. Personally speaking, I am very much, I would like to express my gratitude for Mr. Obama, the sitting US president, the first time in history to visit Hiroshima. It is a beginning of a new chapter, and I value his visit very much. But at the same time, I believe there are three arguments regarding this issue. And the first argument is that I think that nuclear weapon was an indiscriminate weapon, and it was used on Japan when Japan had been virtually de facto defeated and was unnecessary, as pointed out by former US President Dwight Eisenhower in his post-war memoir. And secondly, this indiscriminate weapon was used on civilians, and that's an egregious violation of international law and crime against humanity. That's the way I see it. Even Russians know that. And lastly, my third argument is, Femi, that this so-called intrinsically evil weapon, the A-bomb, this weapon was creates diseases long after the war is over. And that is why on the 18th of September 1945, the US occupying forces in Japan, they imposed a strict censorship banning any journalism, sort of journalism related to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And lastly, I would like to point out that according to Australian journalist Paul Ham, he's mentioned in his book, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that MacArthur killed all 25,000 words on Nagasaki.
So Yujiro, you're putting us in a historical context, but as we have an American president heading to Hiroshima in the next few hours or so,
yes,
what would you say to him?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say again, thank you very much, Mr. Obama, for visiting as the first president of the United States. But at the same time, I don't seek an apology. However, I want the American public to know that the bombing on Hiroshima was unnecessary and it is morally indefensible. Even the US President Dwight Eisenhower has mentioned it was unnecessary.
So that particular president had nothing to do with it. Dan, let me just bring you into the conversation here, because vets in the US are kind of mad right now.
Well, actually not all vets are mad.
Right.
In fact, there's been quite a bit of support for the president's visit. And I think this was a terrible, terrible thing that happened. 140,000 people died. But put it in the context of the most brutal war in the history of the world. 71 million people died. More civilians than people in the military died. And the historians, there is no single answer here. The historians come out on both sides. If you put yourself in the position of the president at the time, President Truman, he had a terribly tough decision to make. He'd only been in office a few weeks. Had he not used that weapon, had hundreds of thousands of Americans died, had hundreds of thousands of more Japanese died, the repercussions for that would have been consequential for him. I think he probably might have been impeached had the American public found out that he had not used a weapon that could arguably have saved more lives than were lost.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned vets, Femi. We got this comment from Mark Bigelow. He says, it does a disservice to all who served to save the nations of the Pacific from Japanese aggression to only list the after effects of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And he goes on to say, I've lived in Japan, and I'm thankful our nations are now the closest of allies. I don't blame the current citizens of Japan for the sins of their fathers, but neither will I whitewash those sins. So keeping that in mind, Dr. Mikamo, what do you see the purpose of this visit being?
This visit is truly historical, in my opinion, because this is the new beginning. And the Hiroshima bombing started the whole new chapter in human history, the nuclear race and all the Cold War and the difficulties. And now the nuclear is more spread than in the 50s, of course. But this time, the first sitting U.S. president visiting the first city that was attacked. Hopefully, that is the only time in the human history. And I would like Mr. Obama to send a strong message. Yesterday's worst enemies can become strong allies. I think all the regions of the world can learn from it.
I want to play a little clip of President Obama speaking in Prague. He's speaking about nuclear weapons. It's quite a famous clip. I'm just going to recap it for you. Have a listen.
As a nuclear power, as the only nuclear power to have used a nuclear weapon, the United States has a moral responsibility to act. We cannot succeed in this endeavor alone, but we can lead it. We can start it. To put an end to Cold War thinking, we will reduce the role of nuclear weapons in our national security strategy and urge others to do the same.
Let's go. I feel that there's a bigger question here, not about whether President Obama will or not apologize. His office already says he's not apologizing, but really about the only nation to use a nuclear bomb and what they can do in terms of leading the rest of the world to become nuclear free. As you've watched the president's presidency, what do you think about what he said in Prague, and then how much has he followed up on that?
Yes, I'd like to say a few words about this, because when he made that speech in Prague in 2009, the people of the world who have been involved in the peace movement, anti-nuclear movement, just overjoyed, rejoiced. We thought that was great. This is the beginning of the new regime with the hopeful, forward-looking attitude. And I especially appreciated the fact that he acknowledged the United States' role. The United States is the only nation which has ever used nuclear weapon in war. And no other American president had ever acknowledged that. So that was great. And then he made the promise that he wanted to have the nuclear weapon-free world. And even Nobel Peace Prize was given to him for that wonderful contribution to make people feel hopeful for the future. But the problem is he has accomplished very little. I mean, he has accomplished something, but the world expected a lot more than that. Let me just add a couple of things. For example, a few weeks ago, I was in Geneva, Switzerland, to attend the United Nations conference, where the delegates from the various governments studied and debated how to find a way to negotiate for banning the nuclear weapon, for the prohibition and elimination of nuclear weapon. Very important conference. But you know, I looked around. There was not single nuclear weapon states presented there. If Mr. Obama really meant what he said, that feel the moral responsibility to lead the campaign to get rid of them. The United States can't do it alone, but United States can lead. But it has not been leading, and doesn't even attend the meeting and boycotting. Not only the United States.
Setsuko, can I ask you a question? Setsuko, yes. Do you think Mr. Obama should return the Nobel Peace Prize then? He hasn't done much, right?
That thought never crossed my mind. I'm glad he said what he said in the speech. And we wanted to see some action to follow his beautiful speech. There has been inconsistency between
but I think the problem with Mr. Obama or the U.S. administration that they haven't ratified the CTBT, and along with China.
You just threw an acronym at us, and the acronym is
that's one of the many things which has not been achieved during his regime. Yes, there are many other issues, but the fact is that the world is in a desperate crisis situation. Now we have 16,000 nuclear weapons, each one of which is many, many times more destructive.
Setsuko, I'm just going to bring in Dan here. Dan,
yes.
go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that in many ways, I think the president's visit to Hiroshima formed something of a coda to the speech that he gave in Prague. And in fact, he has done a number of things to advance a non-nuclear future. It's a very far off, very hard to achieve. He has started an annual nuclear summit amongst all the countries of the world. There was a treaty signed with the Russians that has reduced the number of nuclear weapons. Granted, the United States has not ratified the comprehensive ban on testing nuclear weapons.
Thank you for not sending us an acronym. I appreciate that.
But
Sorry for that.
But we have signed it. It has been signed for some time. That ratification requires the Senate to vote on that treaty. The Senate has not passed it, and that gets to some of the dysfunction actually in Congress. That's not anything that the president can force through. So there are a number of things that I think have to be put in context. Another thing is, keep in mind—
That's why he has not been able to achieve because of the political climate of Washington, because of the party politics, I think. Maybe he had genuine concern, but he has not been able to achieve.
Well, it's difficult when you have to
talking
get 2/3 of the Senate to agree. Getting 2/3 of the Senate to vote for this is almost impossible.
That's what I mean, yes.
So guys, give me a pause for a moment. Setsuko, give me a pause for a moment. I want to go back to our online community.
Well, picking up on something that Setsuko said earlier, that the world expects a lot more than what Obama has done, I would say people online agree with that. This is Armun. She says disarmament would be a far greater gesture of peace than an apology would be. Dr. Mikamo, I know that we've seen in the past protests in Japan, anti-nuclear proliferation protests, people wanting to shut down the reactors in the wake of the tsunami and earthquake a few years ago. What do you make of this comment that disarmament is the thing people really want?
I 100% agree. It is much more important to move forward and achieve each step to go toward the nuclear-free world. The apology, it can be seen in many different ways and interpreted in many different ways, but the actions, that's what we want, and that's what the survivors that I know want. That's what my father wants.
But Dr. Mikamo, do you seriously think that nuclear-free world is possible now in the 21st century? I am skeptical.
I am very skeptical too. I'm skeptical too.
Because once you possess, yes,
I'm skeptical too within 21st century. But within generations, I think it is possible. It starts with the education. And it might be too late for my lifetime or your lifetime. But if we don't move forward that way, then, we would be doomed.
Okay. Could I just ask?
Excuse me, it's been 71 years since that time. And we Hibakusha has been speaking out for the total abolition of nuclear weapons. We have been doing it around the world. And since the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty came into force, it's been 45 years. The nations have been they have been meeting, trying to find a way to achieve that goal. But nuclear weapon states have the legal obligation to fulfill by working toward the nuclear disarmament. But they haven't done that. They have been ignoring it. Yes, Mr. Obama called the Nuclear Weapons Summit, and did any other country said, well, I don't like the agenda, so I'm not coming. But that's what nuclear weapon states are doing now by not coming to Geneva. Yes.
Dan has something he wants to add and talk to you.
You're absolutely right. The Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is signed by more countries than any other treaty in the world, has as its ultimate goal disarmament, a nuclear-free world. But having participated in some of the NPT meetings over the years, including in 1995, when the NPT was extended unconditionally, I can tell you when you get 180 countries together, it's difficult to come to agreement, particularly when a number of the countries who are in the NPT would like to have nuclear weapons. In particular, in 1995, the Nigerians were holding back because they had aspirations to become a nuclear power. Keep in mind what the North Koreans are doing in the neighborhood of Japan and Korea and China, which is a nuclear power, and Russia, which is a nuclear power. They have just held their 7th Party Congress. Kim Jong-un, who is a rather unstable leader, has tested nuclear weapons as recently as January, and the means to deliver them since then.
But Dan, can I ask you a question? You said you attended one of those NPT conferences. Do you seriously think the NPT, the framework is working? That's the first question. Secondly, do you believe in a nuclear-free world now in the 21st century?
I'm going to ask you to answer just the second question because we're almost at the end of the show and I want to fit in Malika before we get there. Nuclear-free world, is that possible?
Is it possible? I doubt it. I wish it were possible, but you have countries like Pakistan, Israel, India, North Korea.
I'm going to take I doubt it and then say, Malika, what else do you have for us?
Well, our community is moving this on just a little bit to talk about what this means for the broader U.S.-Japan relationship. So we have a video comment from Ben Rimlin, who studies East Asian defense and maritime strategy, and he wants to talk about a reciprocal visit to Pearl Harbor. Have a look.
All of this news about Obama's visit to Hiroshima has opened up a lot of discussion in Japan, both among the commentariat and the government, as to whether or not it would be a good idea for Prime Minister Abe to reciprocate the visit and head to Pearl Harbor or even Nanjing instead. For me, this would result in a tremendous strengthening of the U.S.-Japan alliance, because both of our countries would finally be advancing on a common understanding of history, not just a common political understanding. That'll truly give the alliance foundations for the future ahead.
Dan, do you see that happening?
I actually think it will happen. It cannot be presented as a deal, as reciprocity, but I'm willing to bet that it's going to happen later on this year, and I think that would be a wonderful thing, because history in East Asia persists. Relations between Japan and China are still raw over what was mentioned, the rape of Nanking. Relations between Japan and Korea had been in real trouble because of disputes over the so-called comfort women issue. We really have to move on. These countries have to address honestly what has happened,
can I ask you a
including
question?
in the Chinese, for example. Mao was responsible.
In the comfort woman issue? Do you believe that 200,000 women were actually raped and kidnapped by the Japanese army?
Yujiro, I'm just going to take...
Sorry, it's a different issue.
Yeah, it's a different issue. So I'm not actually going to take that, right? Because we're actually focusing on this.
Can I join the discussion?
Absolutely, Setsuko, but we're right at the end of this part of the program. So we're actually going to move on to our post-show. So Setsuko, hold tight for a moment. Just give me 30 seconds to end this part of the show. And for our regular viewers, you know what happens next. Everybody bubbles up at the end of the show, and then we say, Dan and Dr. Mikamo and Yujiro and Setsuko, we're going online at stream.alzero.com, where we will continue the conversation there. Just want to tap in. I know it's very early in the morning, Japan. Who's following this?
I'll take us full circle to someone who's been to Japan.
Okay.
I'm not there now. Sleepless in VA says, visit or no visit, this won't change history. Apologizing is one thing, not remembering history and repeating it is more offensive.
Wow. Isn't it really interesting that one US president's visit to Hiroshima has spawned an entire conversation that takes us into nuclear proliferation, nuclear arms, and much more. To be continued online, stream.alzero.com. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you soon. Hello again, this is the Streams Online Post Show. I'm going to get right back to the conversation. It was a wide-ranging conversation. I suppose when you're talking about a nuclear bomb, the only one that was ever dropped, or the only two that were ever dropped, it does spawn a huge conversation.
Yeah.
We want to bring it back, though, to what, Malika?
U.S.-Japan relations, and it's
Right.
actually, when you were talking about it, we had that video comment at the end, it sparked a conversation, and we heard several people wanting to get in on that. Do you want to summarize what you were saying?
Well, U.S.-Japan relations, I think, at this point are arguably better than they've been at any point since the Second World War. There have been a number of changes that Japan has made on the security front under Prime Minister Abe that have made it the U.S.-Japan alliance closer than ever before. He's also attempted to reinvigorate their economy through Abenomics. And because of some of the threats that are posed by China in the South China Sea, East China Sea, it's really cemented the U.S.-Japan relationship. And this visit is one more step in the road toward even closer relations. And that's why I think a trip to Hiroshima, to Pearl Harbor would be a very useful step as well.
So what do you actually know? Because no one says, the Prime Minister of Japan will be in Pearl Harbor within this year. No one, you wouldn't make that statement without knowing something. Dan, what do you know? Cough it up.
Discussions with various people around town who have been thinking about this.
Yes.
Worked on the Obama campaign in 2008, was one of his Asia advisors.
Right.
There have been some things talked about for the second term, and the hope has always been, if there was a visit to Hiroshima, there would be a visit to Pearl Harbor as well.
I kind of got the feeling that the president and his team sat around thinking, how can we blow people's minds in the last few days of our presidency? This would be major.
Well, he's in his legacy last month. This is the time to do these sorts of things.
You just mentioned South China Sea. Currently, I'm stationed in Hong Kong at the moment, right in front of the South China Sea, obviously. Do you believe that Japan should revise the Constitution, Article 9, yes or no?
Excuse me, can I
Japan has already
Absolutely, Setsuko. I'm just going to allow Dan to do this. Absolutely, Setsuko. Let me just get Dan to finish this in one sentence. Yujiro, sit tight for a moment so that we can actually stay on topic. So I'm just going to say, Yujiro, if it's not on topic, don't ask questions. I'm normally not that bossy, but with you, I know you'll forgive me if I am, and I know you appreciate it. Dan, in a one-liner, just answer Yujiro, please.
I think it depends on what amending the Article 9 would include. I don't think it will happen because there's never been an amendment.
You don't think it will happen?
Never been amended.
He doesn't think it will happen. Dan and Yujiro, forgive me. Let me ask Setsuko to join us. Setsuko, you were very patient. What did you want to add? Go ahead.
Yes, I tried to be patient, but I'm rather disturbed because the discussion is taking on. But I am here because I thought you wanted to talk about Hiroshima, what it means, what the Hibakusha want, and well, as somebody else has said, it's a nuclear disarmament. That's the top thing we want. But now we are talking about a visit to Pearl Harbor, Japan-U.S. relationship, comfort woman, and now the Constitution. We seem to be jumping all over the place. These are all important issues, and I have a lot I want to say about all these issues. But we haven't finished talking about the reality of nuclear disarmament and the need for disarmament. And I am sorry about that because we don't seem to have had a good discussion around that issue.
Setsuko, that is part of the conversation. I know we've been having that conversation. We have a number of different people who are guests and who have different interests. We spent a while talking about nuclear disarmament, but not the entire program, because of course the peg for that was a US president's visit to Hiroshima. And then there's a lot of other issues that come off the back of that. If we come back to what you care deeply about, where do you think we are? What's possible?
I'm sorry, I'm not clear of your question.
Yes, sure. When you're talking about what the survivors want, you said you can only really speak for yourself. Where do you think we can go from this one U.S. president visiting Hiroshima? That's why we're talking about it.
On nuclear disarmament, we've been complaining about China and North Korea and all this kind of.
All right, and Setsuko, I'm asking you directly now to talk about what you really care about. Where do you think we can? What can we achieve in the next 5 years or so? What's possible?
Well, who can? Well. I am sad that some of you said that it's going to take a generation or so many years. We are not going to achieve nuclear disarmament in a lifetime or something like this. And that's a rather pessimistic, skeptic view. And I'd like to feel more committed to achieve the goal. And it is possible, if there is a political will, and we are not seeing that political will among the leaders of the nuclear weapon states.
What do you think is Japan's role in creating a world without nuclear?
Let me just talk about the nuclear weapon states.
Of course, what is Japan's role?
They have the responsibility to do something with what they have. You know, right now, 127 nations have signed the humanitarian initiative, and they're saying we are ready to start working on the negotiation for banning the nuclear weapon. And the United Nations called the conference, and in February and this month, it has met in Geneva, Switzerland. It's going to meet again in New York in August. And that conference produced a report to the General Assembly. In September, that will be presented. And that's going to be a very, very crucial event for all of us, because, you know, all these non-nuclear weapon states have been waiting and waiting for the nuclear weapon states to achieve,
Okay, so Setsuko and Yujiro and Dr. Mikamo and Dan, this is a conversation that obviously we cannot have in just half an hour. There's so much more to talk about. Right. But I am going to draw it to an end for now.
Well, I'm just trying to say how important it's a crucial
Absolutely.
time.
And we hear that importance and that urgency.
2/3 of the member states
I agree with
are
you,
saying
Setsuko.
we don't want it. We have to get rid of them.
All right, so guests, unfortunately we are now out of time.
Complaining about China, North Korea, and so on, we have to look at the United States and Russia, who have the 95% of the nuclear weapon.
Setsuko Furlow.
95%.
Setsuko Furlow, we hear your passion. We thank you for bringing it to this show. Yujiro Taniyama, thank you for being part of the program. Dr. Kiko Mikamo, we appreciate your thoughts. And Dan Bob, we appreciate you being here in the studio. Malika?
Well, this started with an apology or non-apology. All of us looking forward to what Obama will do in Hiroshima. This is Whitney. She says Obama should not apologize, but she adds on in her second tweet, I believe every person in the world with the power to start a nuclear war needs to visit both cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, like I did. And she adds a little tear emoji there, really a way to show the sadness.
Thank you guys very much for being part of today's edition of The Stream. Take care, everybody.